Have you lost her trust? And you tried saying sorry, but it just didn't seem to work. Didn't make her feel better. You still go around this loop of she gets angry, you feel ashamed, you say you're sorry, and it doesn't help. Everything you've tried to fix this situation just either makes it worse or at best doesn't make it better. Here's the truth. Apologies aren't going to rebuild trust. They are the first brick. Real healing will happen when there's a consistent change of behavior, and there's a few specific steps you can take, and I'll even take you through the 3 most common mistakes that men make after a betrayal in rebuilding her trust. Stay tuned. My name is Dr. Gregory Donahue, and this is Zen for Men. Men's mental health put into action. Real, practical change. The first thing we need to do in understanding this topic is to understand betrayal trauma. It's a unique form of trauma that actually has to do with lying more than it has to do with any particular behavior. Betrayal trauma can come from a gambling addiction. It could come from secret debt, a secret love affair, a secret online, a secret pornography addiction, alcohol, hiding alcohol. Any kind of secret from any behavior that is hidden can become a betrayal trauma. And the most important part to notice about this is that it's the lie that causes the most trauma, according to the brain, rather than the activity itself. I remember I fell into the idea that if I could just fix the behavior real quick, then trust should be restored immediately. But lying is a little more insidious than that, and it's insidious in so many different ways for them and for us, so let's break this down. Betrayal trauma opens up the file cabinet on everything that we've ever said. So I'll use my own case in this story. I'm coming from a history of porn addiction, lots of lies, and I definitely hid things that I thought would be less admirable from my wife, especially when we first got together. When this happened, everything that I had ever verbally said was suddenly thrown into question, every behavior, because in a sense, I had tricked her. She felt trust for a certain amount of time, and then she found out that trust was a mistake. So 2 kinds of damage happened during betrayal trauma. First, there is the trust in me. She doesn't trust my spoken word. She doesn't trust my intention. She doesn't trust me not to lie again because here's the second form of trust, she was tricked. She then loses trust in her own ability to detect a lie, to detect dishonesty. And that's terrifying. If you don't feel like you can detect dishonesty in your partner, then there's no way that you can protect yourself. A partner loses the trust in themselves to be able to detect dishonesty and manage their own safety, and then they lose trust in the partner themselves. I think you can see now, it took me a while to see that the loss of trust wasn't because of the damaging behavior. It was more because of the lie and the secrecy than anything else. So everything we're about to go into is about restoring trust at the level of lying. It's when a partner's caught off guard because they thought the relationship was going one way, and it was really at a very different place when it comes to their own safety. Just like any trauma, betrayal trauma is going to hit the nervous system for the partner. So the betrayed partner is going to have all of the fight or flight responses, trigger points, and it's going to come up at the most random times. One of the most confusing trigger points between me and my wife was when she started to feel like she could trust me again, she would immediately launch into backtracking and say, yeah, but I thought this before. So even the feeling of trust became a trigger point to backtrack again and go back into questioning and worrying. It could be a billboard, it could be a TV show. I know you guys have experienced that where something pops up on a show and you're like, oh no, and you know it's going to hit her in that particular way. Yes, that is what trauma does. But specifically in betrayal trauma, the partner is going to be looking for ways to protect herself again, to feel safe again. Anything that is a reminder of, oh wow, I was gullible before, I could be gullible again, is going to trigger that same spiral of, man, I was tricked. I got to make sure that doesn't happen again. You may find that your partner is asking you all kinds of questions that are unrelated to the betrayal. I knew what was true in my relationship. I knew what I had done wrong. I knew every lie. I was there when it happened. The whole time I knew what was true and what was not true. But because my wife didn't, she suddenly questioned everything, even the things I had been telling the truth on, even the things that I had never thought about doing. Suddenly, she was like, I was tricked once, I'm not going to be tricked again. This first part of it is incredibly crucial to say it's not just about apology, it's about understanding what betrayal trauma is doing, especially in the state of hypervigilance in the beginning and for a good chunk of time afterwards. there's going to be a lack of believing of apologies. The words of apologies is just going to get heaped on with the other lies. And it's if you could lie to me about other things, you could lie to me about apologizing. Trauma doesn't just get healed overnight. This kind of trauma takes time to restore it, and it's not going to get back to the way it was. We can't scrub away a memory from our entire lives. Now that trust has been broken, there needs to be a new process of rebuilding trust that helps the partner understand why it happened in the first place. Here's the number one reason why apologies fail. Apologies fail because they aren't genuine. And I know that's a tricky subject because I would have told anyone back in the day that I was genuine, but the fact was I was mixed. There was a part of me that either felt justified or felt confused or wanted compassion in my behavior. My apology was genuine, but I was hiding other emotions. And because I was hiding other emotions of defensiveness, and I was trying to convince her that I had other reasons for doing that, or it wasn't so bad, or maybe if she saw it differently, she wouldn't feel as traumatized by it. All of that stuff screams, I have mixed emotions. I'm not purely apologetic. It's more complicated than that. Because my wife could detect that I had other emotions rather than just pure I'm sorry, the apology felt short because she could sense there was more to it than just that. The second reason that apologies often fail is because apology becomes a translation to get over it already. Hey, I said I'm sorry. Or hey, how many times do I need to say I'm sorry? Or hey, how long is this going to last? I told you I'm sorry. What else do I need to do? This is a you problem, not me anymore. There becomes this energy, especially if weeks and months have gone by, even sometimes years have gone by if it hasn't been worked on, where the apology starts to take on this tone of get over it already. I'm sorry. Please move on. That is the other reason why apologies fail. The third reason why apologies often fail is because we expect forgiveness after the apology before more action has taken place. If there's a sense of expectation that me saying I'm sorry then warrants a different response, or we're expecting a specific response, odds are she's going to bristle about that. Because if we have a specific goal in mind that's not purely empathetic and listening, hey, I'm sorry. Now, if I act different, you should treat me different. It doesn't honor the trauma aspect of this. It doesn't honor the rebuilding of trust. It just expects us to go back to the old structure, but that one's actually been knocked down already. Let's talk about rebuilding trust and what does work. If apologizing doesn't work in and of itself, even though it's a necessary step to it, what does work? Step number one, radical transparency. Now, this one is a hot button issue, and I will admit that I fought against it so hard. One of the things that happens if my spoken word is broken is that anything that I can't prove is therefore suspect and is probably going to cause a trigger point. For my wife, everything on my phone, everything online, everything that I did while she wasn't around, if I was where I said I was going to be or not, all of that came into question because me just saying, I was there, don't you believe me? And the answer was, no, you lied to me before, you tricked me before, I don't believe you. That was always the answer. I would either fight or I would say, you know what, you're right, I'm sorry. I had to swallow a lot of the sense of masculine pride because for a while it felt like I was going to be babysat and like she was constantly harping in. I had to dive into it for my own sake, that because I care about the feelings of my wife and because I believe that this is traumatic for her, that she's not intending to belittle me or intending to belabor this long, because I think she's just as uncomfortable as I am. I had to buy into the fact that I needed to have two kinds of honesty and transparency. One is passive honesty, passive transparency. That means she has an open book to everywhere I am and everything I look at. So I downloaded a program on my phone that let her see everything I was doing. She had all the passwords. I let her have my location. Anytime she wanted to call or text, I would send a picture, let her know where I was at. Passive transparency. At any point, she can ask or look into what I'm doing, and she doesn't have to trust my spoken word. That goes such a long way to rebuild trust because it shows, hey, I recognize the damage I've done to my spoken word. So while I'm rebuilding that trust, I want you to feel as safe and comfortable as possible. Now, y'all, this takes time. And I had to fight with this within myself, but it paid off. I can tell you personally from every guy that I've worked with as a therapist, and definitely in my own life, passive transparency and passive honesty was an essential first step towards rebuilding trust. Now, when it comes to active honesty, That's where rebuilding trust really starts to ramp up. I noticed that with my wife and I in this process, that she was acting as the police officer, the investigator, and she would ask all these questions and she would assume I was lying and feel like she had to pick apart the different answers. And for the most part, she did at the beginning because I was very reluctant to give full information. And she noticed I was leaving off 5 or 10% of kind of the more horrible information of what I was doing or meaning. She became the investigator. I became feeling like a child and super resentful. We both hated it. I started picking up the concept, and I got this from the book Worthy of Her Trust by Martinkus, by the way. Fantastic book for some practical steps. We really appreciated it for recovering from an affair, recovering from porn. So Worthy of Her Trust by Martinkus. He talked about active honesty as actively, proactively offering her information that might trigger her before she has a chance to check for herself. This was tough. It was not what I was used to. It actually gave me a ton of anxiety to give information that she might react badly to. For instance, I had to go another route because of construction, but I went through a neighborhood and she was worried that I did something there. I would tell her in advance, hey, there's construction. I would say, I'm going through this neighborhood. My GPS may show that. It may still trigger her, but it was way better in the long run for me to be taking the lead to let her know, look, you don't need to investigate. You can if you want to. That's the passive transparency. But actively, I'm going to take the lead as often as I can and tell you that information. That paid dividends, y'all. That was a huge step in a direction where she could feel consistently. And it took hundreds of examples of this, even minor, where eventually she was like, yeah, okay, whatever. That where she stops caring was amazing because that meant I was doing my job, that her nervous system had successfully relaxed and said, okay, I'm starting to believe that he will tell me before I have a chance to find out. And every time I double checked his information, it was accurate. That kind of stuff really pays off long run to deactivating her nervous system and this betrayal trauma. The second thing that works really well beyond transparency is consistency. Under pressure, especially when you're triggered. Consistency is about if you're going to say something or if you're going to promise to do something, don't go back on it in a moment where everything loses its head. There's so many times my wife and I were convinced our relationship was going to be over. And in that moment, both of us wanted to just say, screw it, just do whatever you want. And there were times where she said, you know what, if that's what you want to do, just go and do that. I don't care. And I was tempted to be like, fine, I'm going to turn off my GPS. I'm going to go back on social media sites, all of this different stuff. Don't. And I know that seems obvious, but in the heated moment, it is so easy just to throw in everything and say, it doesn't matter anyway. Our rebuilding trust process was a lot like a stock market. There are going to be days where it crashes and there's panic, but as any financial advisor will tell you, in the most case, if you have a diversified portfolio, leave it in, ride it out. You're looking for trends. You're not looking for doomsday. There will be so many moments where both of you, in moments where my wife and I both were convinced there was no hope, there was no point. We hated each other. In those moments, it was essential in rebuilding trust. I stayed consistent for my own sake, not just for her, but that what I was doing was because it was what I believed was the right thing to do. Any measure you put in place, it would be way better for me to say, you know what, I don't know that I can stay consistent with that right now, and then piss her off, rather than say, you know what, I'll do it, and then take it back later. That does so much more damage. So think through what you're going to do and be consistent. The next thing I really had to, this is a tough one, but step 3 is about regulating my emotions during this time. I realized pretty quickly that my wife was not going to be willing to give me a whole lot of affirmation. Now, some are, but in a lot of cases that I've seen with betrayal trauma, affirmation and encouragement and support is not really at the top of mind. She's trying to survive. And my wife actually had a belief that if she encouraged me, that I would stop doing it. That if she was like, yep, congratulations, you're doing great, it's working, I would be like, oh, great, I can stop doing this stuff now. There was validity to that because there were times where she would compliment me about doing a chore or doing something consistently. And as soon as I got affirmation, I was like, oh, that's what I wanted. And I would think that there was less tension around it, so I'd stop doing it or do it less. In this case, I had to learn to get all of my emotional support for a while externally. This is 12-step groups. This is men's groups. This is having close guy friends that I could contact and say, hey, you got this. guys that are healthily married and have good positive views on marriage. This was not about me agreeing to be pummeled verbally. So this was more, I still had boundaries and I still wasn't going to be a punching bag for my wife's emotions. However, I was understanding that what she was going through was trauma. And I did realize that the encouragement I needed really did need to come from external, because if I put all of my expectations on my wife to motivate me through this, I just rode her ups and downs. So if she had a good day, I would have a good day, bad day, bad day. That's codependency, y'all. That's one of the things that started betrayal in the first place, was my codependency on her. I needed to learn to get my emotional needs met, my affirmations, compliments, support, encouragement from outside for at least the first 6 months. Game changer, especially 12 steps. Check it out. Step number 4 of what works is owning your own pain in the process. Just because she's in pain doesn't mean you're not feeling emotions. I felt a ton of conflicted anger, upset, sorrow, loneliness. There were so many things I was feeling along the way, and I had to take responsibility for owning those things and working through them on my own. Journaling with the men's group, meditation, breathing skills, all of those things to validate and explore my own emotions. Part of that process was looking for the why did I betray in the first place? What was going on that I wasn't taking care of in my own life that led me to those things? For me, it was long-term addiction, both video games and pornography, and then the lying part on top of that. That all came from a specific type of coping skill in pain. I had to dive into that, and I had to do it for myself. Owning my own pain was almost a way of respecting myself, so that even though it hurt her and I should feel ashamed, or she was maybe shaming me for it, I had to go in on my own for compassion first and figure out, you know what? I am curious why I did this, and I'm going to go into this with compassion because I want to become a trustworthy person. And if there's something in me that isn't trustworthy, I need to figure out what that is and why. I assume first it has a good reason. Owning my own pain and validating my own pain as a way of exploring why did I do this so that I can become a trustworthy person is an essential step forward. The last thing I'll say as a fifth thing that you should really do as a way of rebuilding trust is to have a strong action plan. It doesn't have to be your own plan. My plan first came from going to therapy, and then my therapist eventually told me, hey, you need to go to 12 steps. So in that, I went to 12 steps, and the cool part about 12 steps is it has a plan. I can find a sponsor. I can work the steps. I can meet regularly. There's a game plan in that process. Go see a CSAT therapist if there's a sex addiction or infidelity involved. Have a game plan. It doesn't have to be yours. It could be guided by professionals or another program. But that makes it feel like you're not relying on your own path, because remember, she doesn't trust that path anyway, but she can rely on another proven path as what's going to get you both to make progress, where she doesn't have to trust me. She can trust the program or a professional, and even bring her in on that process. Have her meet your sponsor, have her go to co-therapy for a little while so that she can be involved in that planning process and have some buy-in. I know it can be so easy to feel stuck and confused and mixed emotions about this time period. I promise you, that's a good sign. It means that you care about what's going on, that you don't want the relationship to end. I know it can be easy to think, let's just go back to the way things were when she trusted me. But the reality is, if there was a betrayal of trust, something wasn't working for somebody, and that needs to be worked on. Don't stay stuck there in that confusion. Don't just repeat apologies over and over and expect that to be good enough. Go out and make a plan. Seek help, therapy, 12 steps, something. Make that plan. Don't just rely on apologies to rebuild trust. If this hit home for you, one thing I'll ask, please hit the subscribe button down below. Makes a huge difference in the algorithm to get this message and more like it to the men who need it. Happy mental health.